Hello everyone, welcome to this tutorial on AWS Lambda. In this tutorial, we are going to discuss everything about AWS Lambda, starting from what Lambda is and what are the use cases for AWS Lambda. And we'll also see how Lambda works in the backend and how the pricing model of AWS Lambda works. And then we will also do some hands-on practice like how to create a Lambda function, how to run it, and how to integrate a Lambda function with other AWS services and many other things like that. Okay, so without any delay, let's get started. So firstly, just to understand at a high level what AWS Lambda is, it's a service which AWS provides, which lets you run code without, provisioning or creating any clusters. So you have a piece of code that you want to run. You don't want to create any servers or provision clusters. You don't want to bother about all that stuff. You just want to run your code. So AWS Lambda enables you to do that. So just to demonstrate the same concept, I'm going to use this page that AWS has. Okay, so here you can see how the Lambda works. So you can run your code in any of these languages. So let me select Python. Let's assume you have a code like this, and if you just hit run, it will run. Okay, it's that simple. You just bring your code, put it on AWS Lambda, and then run the function, and it will execute. Okay, so that is a very high level overview of what AWS Lambda is. It lets you run your code without thinking or bothering about any servers or any infrastructure. Okay, so this is what AWS Lambda is, and let's see some use cases of AWS Lambda. So the way it works is like you can have a Lambda function which has your code, and this Lambda can run in response to any of the events which are occurring. If you have a file which comes into your S3 and you want to process that file, you can trigger a Lambda and then it will process it. Okay, or if you have any streaming analytics or any email files, videos, or images that you want to, or like mobile IoT backends, so you can keep your Lambda as a response to any of these events. So let me just demonstrate that. So if I just uh, so this is basically first. Now, this Lambda can also run in response to events. Okay, so when I say events, so if you see here, the event can be your data from any streaming analytics that you're getting, or it can be from mobile IoT backends, or it can be some images or videos, video files that come into S3. Okay, so you can configure your Lambda in response to any of these events. So if it's just a visual representation. So if I click here, so I'm generating an event from my mobile IoT and it triggered a Lambda here. So if you see, and if I trigger this, so it will basically drop a file in S3 and that triggers a Lambda. So if I just keep hitting, so it will keep triggering. So basically this also shows that your Lambda can run concurrently many times. So if I hit this, so now my Lambda is running in response to this mobile or IoT backend. Okay, so this is just some visual demonstration to show you like how your Lambda can work as a response to different events. Okay, so the next feature about the Lambda is basically it can scale very seamlessly. So now it is just running for one invocation. So if I keep doing these invocations very continuously, if you see, it will scale up automatically and seamlessly, and you do not have to worry about scaling up or scaling down. So that is another very good feature of AWS Lambda. So we said that we need not have to worry about the servers or the infrastructure. uh, does that mean that Lambda runs without any servers at all? No, it actually runs on the servers, but it is just that AWS is taking care of provisioning that infrastructure and servers and runtime environment for us, and we have to do is just create our application code and then put it on Lambda and run it. So with that basic understanding of what Lambda is and how it works, let's see some use cases of Lambda. So here, you can see it can be used to process files. So whenever a file comes into S3, you can trigger a Lambda and process it, and do whatever processing that you want, and then generate the output. So it can be used for file processing in Amazon S3, or it can also be used for stream processing. So if you want to analyze some real-time streaming logs or something like that, you can uh, like generate like trigger the Lambda in response to Amazon Kinesis and ingest that and process that in Lambda and put it into output like DynamoDB or whatever. So it can also be used for stream processing and web applications as well. So like, I mean, you have a front end. I mean, if like, let's say a user of your website invokes some API, it will invoke the Amazon API gateway, and the backend of that API gateway can be your Lambda, where like your logic for that API is sitting. So once a Lambda is triggered, it can like basically like fetch. Like in this example, they are basically getting the weather information. So when a user requests a weather information from the website, it triggers like Amazon API gateway, REST API, and in the backend Lambda is triggered and the Lambda fetches the data from DynamoDB and returns the data. So yeah, it can be used in your like as a backend for your web applications, and similarly in IoT backends as well, or mobile backends. So there are a lot of other use cases as well, like we discussed earlier. Lambda can be triggered as a response to any of your AWS events, which we will see when we are actually working hands-on with the Lambda. And there are a lot of other use cases for AWS Lambda. Okay, so now let's see how the pricing of the AWS Lambda works. So just to show you, like, I mean, here the Lambda, they say that they charge you for like GB on a GB second basis. So what I mean by that is, when you are creating your Lambda function, you also choose the amount of memory that you want. Okay, so let's say you like choose 1 GB for your Lambda function, and it runs for like let's say 10 seconds. That will be considered as 10 GB seconds. So your Lambda will be charged as per that like compute time is measured in GB seconds. Okay, so you can see the pricing and I mean the approximate calculations here in the pricing page of AWS Lambda. But they also provide like a free tier um, for people to run Lambda. So it's basically for every month. I think you get like if you choose a Lambda function with 1 GB memory, I guess you can run around for 100 hours, I guess, for as a free tier without being charged anything for running that AWS Lambda. So it's very useful for people to practice and learn AWS Lambda as well. Okay, so that's about the AWS Lambda pricing. Now let's actually go to Lambda function. I mean AWS Lambda console and create our first Lambda function. Okay, so let me click on create a function here. Okay, so you can author from scratch, or you can use a blueprint that AWS provides, or you can also use a container image. We'll come back to this later. So basically, you can package your application and bring it into AWS Lambda. So we'll discuss this concept later. Okay, so let for now I'll select author from scratch. Okay, so let's call that my first Lambda. Okay, and the next thing is the runtime. Okay, so like we already discussed, AWS Lambda provides an option to like bring like write your code in any of these languages like .NET, Java, Node.js, Python, Ruby. Okay, so let's select Python for this function, and the next thing is basically the architecture. So basically the computer architecture in the backend in which you want your code to run. So I'll select this x86 architecture. Okay, we have two options here. ARM architecture also is available. Okay, so I'm going to select Python for my runtime, and so next thing is the permissions. So um, by default, Lambda will create an execution role with permissions to upload logs to CloudWatch logs. Okay, so when you create, if you select this create a new role with basic Lambda permissions, Lambda will create one IAM role and attach it to this Lambda function that we are creating. And that IAM role will have a basic permissions to upload logs to CloudWatch. Okay, so if you want to give any other access to AWS Lambda, you can actually create another role and attach that one here. So for now, I'm going to select this option itself, but we are going to see how to add additional permissions for Lambda roles. Okay, so let this be, and it will also show you like the name of the role that execution role that it will create. Okay, so under advanced settings, you can see like enable code signing, enable function URL. So basically, when you use this, it will assign an HTTPS endpoint for your Lambda function. So you can use that endpoint to trigger your Lambda function. So we will leave all these like empty for now. We will come back to this later. So you can also enable VPC and like connect your function to your if you have any VPC that you want your Lambda to communicate with, you can enable that and connect your Lambda to that VPC as well. Okay, so we'll come back to those later. So for now, I'm just going to click on create function with these basic configurations. So let's wait for that function to be created. Okay, so now my function is created. So after the function is created, you can start adding your code here. Let me just refresh this page. Okay, okay. So this is where you can add your code. Um, and let me also walk you through before I actually write some code, let me walk you through other options that are available in the Lambda console. So the first thing that I want to discuss is this trigger. So this is the trigger that I was discussing. When we said that AWS Lambda can act as a response to events, you define that event here and add that as a trigger for the Lambda. So if you see, the trigger can come from many of these sources like API gateway, Alexa, CloudFront, code commit. You can also trigger AWS Lambda as a response to your code commit. When you push a code to your repository or something like that. Okay, so it supports a lot of events. Okay, so it can be S3 event or anything. Okay, so these are the sources. So if you see, there are outside AWS integrations also, like Salesforce and all those things, Shopify. Okay, so it provides a lot of sources, like it can act as a response for any of these events. Okay, so we'll come back to that later. So now let's write some code. So let me actually first run this. Okay, if you click on test here, can be, let me just give some sample thing. Click on save and click on test. So yeah, it ran. So that it is that easy. You just, you just need to write your code here and then give some input and then just run it. So that's how simple AWS Lambda is. So now we have created a very basic Lambda function. So next thing what we'll do is we will try to process some S3 file using AWS Lambda. So our use case, let's think whenever there is a file which is landing in AWS S3, we want to trigger this AWS Lambda function and do some file processing. Okay, so let's see how to do that. Okay, so let's think this is our source bucket. So whenever there is a file uploaded to this source bucket, we want to trigger the Lambda and copy over that file automatically to this destination bucket. So let's try to use Lambda for the simple use case. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to add a trigger here in Lambda console. So click on trigger. So the source for us is S3 and select your bucket. So the bucket is AWS Lambda source bucket one. So the next thing is what is the event type? So when on what event do you want to trigger the Lambda? So for us, we want to trigger only when like when a file is uploaded. So I'll just create use post, or you can also use all object create events. So let me keep that all object create events, and prefix is optional. So if you want to trigger only when a file is uploaded under a certain prefix, you can keep that. And you can also keep an optional suffix, like if you want to trigger Lambda only when a JPG or a JSON file is uploaded, you can keep that as well. Okay, so I'll just acknowledge this. So this is what this is saying is recursive invocation. So if your Lambda has code let's say to write back that file into that same H3 bucket, right? So what will happen is the output file will again trigger the Lambda, and then the Lambda will write the output to the same bucket. So it will keep on going on endlessly, and you will end up incurring a lot of costs. So that is what AWS is warning about. Okay, so I'm not going to write to the same bucket. So I'll click on acknowledge and click on add. Okay, so now we have added a trigger to this Lambda function. So the next thing, so if you see now, when this trigger has started appearing here. Okay, so actually when we are solving this use case, we will discover a bunch of like options, like bunch of concepts of AWS Lambda as well. Okay, so let's write code to like read the file like whenever it is triggered from that file and copy that file into the another S3 bucket. Okay, I already have the code with me, so let me just quickly walk you through the code. So what is happening is like you have um, the another concept that I want to talk here is about the event and context. So event will have a details of the event which triggered your Lambda function. So in this case, since we are triggering based on an S3 file upload, this event will have all the details of that file and like upload date and all those things like where the event came from. Okay, so this context will have like object will have the information regarding the runtime and all those things. Okay, so that is about the event and context. A Lambda handler is basically the function which gets triggered when you invoke the Lambda function. So that is your handler function. Okay, so those are the three concepts that I wanted to talk about. Now let's talk about this code that we have. Okay, so what I have here is like we already discussed, when we trigger through an S3 event, this event will have all the like data about the event. So in that event, like we'll have records. Basically, if it multiple events are there, like each will be a record. So from that record, I'm getting the key of the S3 file that got uploaded, and I'm just setting the copy source and the destination key, and I'm using the Boto3 API to copy the file from one bucket to another bucket. So this is a very simple code. Let me just take this code and paste it in my Lambda console. Okay. So yep, now I have pasted it. So once it is done, I'll just do a deploy. It's updating my function code. Okay. So now let's try and upload the file in AWS Lambda source bucket and see if that triggers a Lambda. Okay. I want to like this Lambda will fail, but I am intentionally doing that to show you like one concept. Okay, so now the file is uploaded. Let's see if the Lambda is triggered. Okay, so to like check the logs and everything and to monitor the Lambda, you can use this monitor section. Here you will see all the details about the invocation and everything. So click on this view CloudWatch logs. It will take you to the CloudWatch log group for that particular Lambda. Okay. So, yep. Now, we have a stream. So this is the stream for the recent invocation. So if you see here, it says client error, an error occurred while calling access denied. Okay, so this is the error that I wanted to show you. Now, since we were when we were creating the Lambda, we had not given any explicit permissions for this Lambda to access S3. Okay, we had only given, like if you remember, we talked that the Lambda role will have only basic CloudWatch log group permissions. So that is why it is not able to read the file from or copy the file from S3 bucket to another. Okay, so we will have to give the permissions for S3 to the Lambda role. So how do I do that? Go to this configuration and in the configuration click on permission. So this is the role that is attached to AWS Lambda, this Lambda function. Click on that. Okay. So to this role, I'm going to add another permission like click on attach policy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give S3 Amazon S3 full access. You can of course fine tune your access as per your requirements. So I'm going to click on add. Okay, so now this will be updated. So let us try to trigger this Lambda function again by uploading a file to S3. Okay, so let me click on add files. Let me upload the same file again. That's fine. Okay, so now let's go back to the CloudWatch log groups and see if that Lambda was invoked again. So it will take some time for the log stream to appear here. Okay, so let me open this log stream. So here now, if you see, uh, yep, in the logs, if you see, it says file thumbnail copied from this bucket to this bucket. So let's go and check in the destination bucket. So let's go here and check my destination bucket one and set this copy folder. Yep, there is this file. So okay, so that is how we configure a Lambda to like in response to an S3 event. Okay, So another thing that I want to touch upon here is the environment variables in AWS Lambda. So like if you don't want to keep this like variables here, you can keep like store these variables as environment variables. So how to do that? Go to your configuration and click on environment variables and click on edit and click on add environment variable. So it's a key value pair. So let's do like source bucket, and the value will be this, and also destination bucket. Okay, so let me remove this code. So now we have stored these variables as environment variables. We will not, I mean, don't need to hard code this in the code anymore. Okay, so to fetch those variables from environment variable, just like any other environment variable, we can just type os dot environ and give the name of that. We're given the same name, so it's going to copy this. So this way we can avoid hard coding the values in the code. So that is another concept that I wanted to talk about. So yeah, I think we have pretty much covered everything about AWS Lambda here. Like, I mean, what is a handler and what is the event context, and then we also discussed about how to monitor your Lambda functions. And in the configuration section, we also like talked about the triggers, and then we also talked about the permissions, the destinations. We will talk more about this in the later videos. The function URL, like I was talking, you can configure an HTTPS endpoint, um, which you can use to invoke this I mean Lambda. We'll talk about that as well. So the environment variables also we discussed. So the VPC as well. Okay. So yep, these are some basic must know concepts about AWS Lambda that I mean everyone must know. Okay, so that was the introduction to AWS Lambda and some hands-on practice. In the upcoming videos, we are going to discuss more advanced concepts like I mean, building the Lambda functions with packages or containers, and then we'll also see like how to build REST APIs using Lambda, and we'll talk more advanced concepts about AWS Lambda. So, yep, that's it for this video. I hope you found the video helpful. If you did find the video helpful, please do not forget to like, share this video, and also subscribe to my channel. And also, please let me know in the comments what you would like to see next in this channel. Okay, thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.